Let's call the Mandan Public School Board March 18th school board meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do we have any agenda changes? Dr. Bitts?
You do. I have a new hire. If you could add it to new business letter A, review and consider approval of the following teaching contracts. And if below Tessa John, if you could add Kelsey Craig, special ed teacher at Red Trail. And then I do have three more resignations under letter B. Elvin Crow, instruction technology at Mandan High School. Ruth Sutherland, Bass at Mandan High School. And Kayla Fisher, special ed at Red Trail.
All right. Anything else? Just for everybody online that maybe didn't hear that, we're having a mic issue here. Dr. Bitts said under new business, under A, we're going to add Kelsey Crite, special ed, and Red Trail, which is approval of the teaching contracts. And then on B, under review and consider approval of the following letters of resignation, add Eldon Crow, Ruth Sutherland, and Kayla Fisher. Anything else in relation to that? If not, what are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Rebinich, please call roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. We'll move on then to public communications. Anybody that wants to provide any public communications? All right, seeing none, since we don't have anybody in the yard here, we'll move on then to the administrator's report. The first item on the administrator's report is the demographic report and enrollment projections via Zoom. Dr. Bitts.
Yeah, I would like to introduce Rob Schwartz from RSP in Kansas, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right.
All right, wonderful. Is everybody able to hear me?
Just 1 second, Rob. We're having a little trouble hearing you. Try again.
Great. This is Rob Schwartz, RSP and Associates.
Yep, we're not hearing them out here. Can you get them turned up?
Mute, but it's
Just give us
quiet.
1 second, Rob, or I can see you and hear you, but not loud. I'm trying to. Oh.
Is there any other adjustments you're making?
Rob,
Try
please
again,
go ahead.
Rob. Can you hear me, Rob? No, now he can't hear him at all.
He can hear us.
He can hear us.
He can hear us. We can't hear him. If you could give it another shot.
You can check some of my audio too. Just
Yeah, we can. Maybe if I try again once.
all right, good. This is Rob Schwartz with RSP. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying to get you on the microphone in the room, but we can hear you.
Good. I switched audio systems, but maybe that made it better.
What's that?
I
I
switched
think.
audio.
Try again, Rob.
Rob Schwartz with RSP. Can you hear me?
He's going to turn you up here.
All right, good.
Can you talk one more time?
Yep, Rob Schwartz with RSP and Associates.
Better.
All
Better, but not, still not good.
I was working with my audio and I have the microphone at its highest sensitivity.
Can we give it one more shot?
Do you want me to speak again?
Yeah, if you could.
Great. Rob Schwartz with RSP and Associates.
That'll work.
Okay, you just have to unmute it when he's done talking.
Sure. Go ahead, Rob. It's all yours.
He can't.
Oh.
Totally unmute.
Go ahead, Rob. It's all yours. We can hear you now.
Right. Wonderful. Hey, so good evening. Rob Schwartz with RSP. You might have seen this presentation and been a little bit daunted by 74 pages. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of the pages. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that will help you understand what's happening in your district. You're very familiar with the work that RSP does, so I don't need to do a lot with the introduction of RSP other than the fact that there's other team members on my team that have provided a lot of the visuals and the analytics that we're going to talk about tonight. In the presentation, this report, there's some expectations of what you're going to get, how you look at the information. It's basically categorized in these components. Part 1 is enrollment and demographics. Part 2 is development and growth trends. Part 3 is projections, and then Part 4 is next steps. We also have added some different elements into the presentation to help you understand. Is it a signature slide that may help you understand some different things? Is it something that maybe is an indicator of student growth or student loss? So page 4 is a nice handy tool to know what some of those icons might be. I'm going to start with the enrollment and demographics and start out with this 100,000 foot perspective. So good news, if you're for growth, we're indicating that you're going to continue to grow and through 28-29 by about 400 students. You can see the breakdown of where that growth is. It's very evident that we're having some large grades move into the middle school and high school by the amount of increase that's taking place at both the middle school and high school grades. When we get into capacity, there is some challenges at the middle school, and we have some challenges potentially in some of the other buildings as we get down to that level, but we'll talk more about that when we get to the projections. We have factored in some of the enrollments, development forecast, in expectations, things related to this being an election year, things related to what's been happening with some of your developments as it's going through some ownership changes. Again, I'll talk more about that in the development section. There's lots of visuals in this presentation to help you understand and put some sense of where students are or whatever we're analyzing, where is it in the district. Typically in most of our maps, we know you're beyond the city limits of Mandan, so there will be an inset typically on the bottom left corner of all the maps that will show the entire district boundary. Predominantly the kids are in the city limits of Mandan. One thing that's new for your analysis from years past is this transition area. So it's that brown hatched diagonal area outside of the solid colors. So that's an important piece because there's options for what building they might be able to attend. If you remember, we take your district and we break it down smaller than the district boundary, smaller than census blocks. We're looking at the type of developments. This map is to help illustrate what planning areas mean. The dots on this particular map represent when units were built by decade for the most part. The green lines are the planning areas. And everything just back to things that we can analyze for enrollment, development, and demographics. That gets into the sophisticated forecast model. Every different variable that we look at is applied to each of those planning areas. We've given you a subset of some of that data on the right-hand side in those bullet points. What I want you to take away is here on page 11. We have been giving you an RSP likely forecast. And I think page 11 helps you understand that when we don't hit that likely forecast, there's some items that we're analyzing that maybe were better or worse than what we were thinking would happen. So if we look at that top part of this page in orange, those would be areas that they outperformed what we thought would happen. So the enrollment projection would be greater than the likely forecast. Those in that green shading would be things that we aren't meeting the performance, so less expectation. Let me tell you what that means. We're in a interesting time period with mortgage interest rates. Many of you might be like me. I have a 3% interest rate. Now it's closer to 7%. That has an impact of how fast people move out of their existing housing inventory, how many people will actually buy new inventory, as well as some of your existing inventory as people move around in the community. These are the things that we're trying to track that are based on the age of the structures and the value of those structures. We'll talk about that in a moment, but everything's very dynamic, very fluid with how the model is looking at things. One of our stopping points has been with live birth information. This table illustrates the number of live births that have happened in Morton County from 2005 through 2023. One clear thing that is evidence is that enrollments or live births has declined a little bit from our high years of over 500 live births in 2015 and 2016. As you move to the right, what we've done is 5 years later, when potentially those live births would be kindergartners, we tell you the number of kindergartners. A couple of things about this data. It's not a true apple-to-apple comparison of live births to the number of kindergartners. In any of these years, we might have more live births in October, November, and December, which means we would not see them as kindergartners for 6 years, not 5 years. We also don't have things in live birth data that reflect people that are moving into your community that did not have children born in Morton County 5 years ago. That being said, we give an indication of what a low and high range potentially could be with perspective to the number of live births in the calendar year. So the green would be the low range, the orange shaded areas are the high range. So again, this is the market share. In order for us to beat the 324 that we have this year and to get closer to 400, that's going to require that we have a greater market share as the number of live births change, or we have more migration of people into your community that have younger age family that would be future kindergartners. Past enrollment. When I look at this particular table, it's illustrating from 2010-11 through 23-24 the number of students by grade. One element that has been evident in your district is when we looked at the senior class from the previous year and compared that to the following year kindergarten class, we've typically had smaller senior grades than those that are coming in the next year as kindergartners. When you look at that bottom row and we start seeing some of those classes of 323, 319 that are in the 8th and 9th grade, moving forward in order for us to continue having more kindergartners than graduating seniors, one of two things must happen. One, we get more kindergartners, or two, the change in enrollment, cohort change, as those grades move through the system, gets smaller. Let's talk about cohort change. In this table, we're illustrating what has happened year to year as those grades move forward. Black numbers represent a positive increase. Red numbers represent a decrease as that student's grade moved from one grade to the next. We typically are seeing decreases from 10th to 11th grade if you follow that column all the way up. Some of this is early graduation. Some of this might even be what I would coin recovery credits as students work their way through the high school system. This is very typical of what we see in a lot of the North Dakota districts. Another stopping point is our migration. So we're showing the last 3 years by grade band of elementary, middle, and high school. And for 3 school years, so the 2021-22, 2022-23, and 2023-24 school years. Quick definition of what you're seeing. The green part of the bars represents students the previous school year that were receiving services, so that is student ID number, but in that year that we're analyzing, they're not here receiving services, so we lost those kids. The orange bars are kids that were not here the previous school year, but are here in the school year that's represented in this 3-year analysis. What I'm wanting you to see from this is there's some differing trends that are in each of these grade bands. We clearly see a lot more change with the elementary school. A lot of that is because we have 6 grades, whereas the middle school is 3 and the high school is 4. But when we look at this in greater detail, there's just more movement of families, typically when their kids are in the elementary grades than when they finally get to the middle school or high school. This movement of students represents where we either see an increase or a decrease in our migration. So of these 3 years, 2 of the years we've had an increase, 1 year a decrease. So the 22-23 school year, we had an overall decrease. This table builds on what was previous, but shows it to you by each building. And this was something that was an interesting conversation with administration. Interesting in the sense of like when you see it this way, not interesting in what was being felt in those buildings. Clearly Fort Lincoln and Roosevelt Elementary have the most amount of change when it's out migration and what that may mean for in-migration. Some of this is related to the new school and the boundary changes as a reflection, but these are kids that are either new to the district or they left the district. Why they left the district, that's an unknown, but we know there's this movement. You can see what this means as it relates to each of those attendance areas. We also had a stopping point with out-of-district students, and we're showing you the top 3 districts where we get schools. Clearly Little Heart 4 and Sweetbriar 17 don't have secondary buildings, so we naturally can pick up kids from them. And then when we get to Bismarck Public Schools, a majority of them are likely staff member students that are coming into your system. But again, we wanted to have a sense of what's been happening here over the last 5 years. And this year we're at 131, which is about what we're seeing for the average over these last 5 years. We also looked at what was happening because of the way the data was sent to us with students with the instructional modality of whether they're brick and mortar or homeschool. And so you can see some consistency in what we're seeing with the homeschool enrollment versus the brick and mortar. Other visuals that we're able to capture because of the way we're looking at your data at that planning area level illustrates where enrollment is changing. If it's increasing, it's orange. If it's decreasing, it's green in color. This changes year to year, but predominantly what we are seeing is either it's new inventory or it's a more reasonably priced inventory, so it's more affordable. We've also provided you a heat map of the students. The visual is that the darker the red, the greater the density of students. And we can see a lot of our clustering that's happening between Main and 94 Highway and around Lakewood Elementary Schools is where we have the darkest red areas. But just in general, where we have elementary buildings, we tend to have a greater density of students. Most of the indicators point towards student increase. I give the caution with the live births because that's gone down. That potentially makes it a greater challenge to bring in a kindergarten class of the sizes that we're used to getting in that roughly 350 range. And stop. Is everyone still able to hear me? I know you guys are muted, but I just want to make sure I'm still there. You guys are hearing and following along with what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're good.
You might be rushing to the mute button. I don't see anything, so I'm going to press
We're good,
on.
Rob.
Very good. So as I move to the development, we try to leave you a visual to understand how some of the data sets in your community correlate and may make some sort of sense in conversations you have with how you plan for future needs of your students. The green line represents the census population estimates. The dip that you see going into the 2021-22 school year, that's expected. We see this in almost every district. It's because we have decennial census data and they've recalibrated based on those long and short surveys that people complete. Bottom line, there's more people in your district than there has been each and every year, so it's a positive increase. The blue line represents the certificate of occupancies, so we've had some reasonable amount of development, not as much as we saw back when you look at 2013-14 and 14-15. We're still seeing some building activity, albeit not as much. When we look at the red line, that represents our enrollment change year to year. And we're just trying to get an understanding. We know that there's building activity. We know more people are living in your district, but that doesn't always translate to having more kids. So this is something that has to be overcome. We think it's going to be the power of what the affordability factor is and what's going on economically that's going to drive the future of enrollment change. Again, I mentioned we looked at the average year builds. So the older it is, the more it'll be in the area of the blue and green. So before 2005 is the blue, and then as we radiate into those oranges and reds, the newer developments. So you can see our clustering. The majority of it's on the south side, but we definitely do have some newer stuff on the north side of the district. We looked at the median home values. Again, we know that goes back to those planning areas. And so on this map, the legend indicates the least affordable become that orange and red areas. The more affordable areas are the blue. So again, older housing inventory usually is translating to the most affordable. When we look at development over time, this visual provides through these columns or bar graph what's been happening decade to decade, except for the last column there on the right. The purple represents the number of units that were available at the start of the decade. The black portion of those bars represents what was built during that decade. So where we're kind of moving is probably something between what we saw in the 2000 decade and the 2010 decade for this current decade that we're in, where we're about almost 4 years into it. In this case, 3 years of building data. One of the other interesting things that we're able to do with these planning areas is understand growth over time. And I know we always try to benchmark, since we do a lot of work with Bismarck. If we compare what you have and what it meant for Bismarck, in single family, they yield a little bit more. They're closer to 20, where you're at about 17. The way you look at this table is it's broken out by each of your existing attendance areas, and you can see we have the flex area on there, so more of the unincorporated. In this time period, we built a little over 1,000 units. Just to give you a comparison, across the river, they built a little over 3,300 single-family units. So again, what portion of your markets? About 25%, if we compare the two districts. The shading represents where, if it's green, it's lower than 3 students from the district average. The orange, it's greater than 3 students of the district average of yielding. So if we look at that bottom row for K-5 students back in 2014 with single family units, we got 15 K-5 students for every 100 single family units. That's increased to about 18. And again, we built almost 1,100 units. We do the same thing with multifamily. With multifamily units, that's defined as everything that's not single family. So mobile homes, townhomes, duplexes, twin homes, apartments, all that gets combined as we look at the multifamily. And you yield a little bit more in multifamily than Bismarck. We're about 11, you're at 13. We've built almost 800 multifamily units in Bismarck, over 2,000. So again, a little bit under 25%, I believe, for the market share between the two communities. And again, you can see what this means for each of the districts or attendance areas. What's really interesting about this, as units come online, this can dramatically change what you see for a yield rate based on the number of units, and do we actually have kids that move into those coined multifamily units. Again, all this back into just trying to understand where are kids, how does it relate to the housing product. This visual on page 29 is an infographic of providing all the information I provided on probably the previous 3-4 slides. So table 1, just to give you a breakdown, so when you come back to this page, when you're looking at the number of units, look at that y-axis on the left side, which corresponds with the bar, and then with the number of students. The right-hand side y-axis gives you the perspective of number of students. So over time, you can see the bar graphs are increasing with units that come online, and you can see how that corresponds with the number of students. So table 1 is with single family, table 2 is the multifamily, and then table 3 is the aggregate of both single family and multifamily, and then table 4 gets at the proportion of single family and multifamily inventory, again from 2014 to 2023. We've looked at the units where they're built. The dots on this map illustrate where those units are. Again, predominantly, there's going to be more of them on the south side than what we see on the north side. From our conversations with the city, we re-honed in on what potentially could be built and classified it in 3 categories. The green is things that would be current or seeing building activity here in the next couple years. The yellow represents where it's more likely towards 5 years, and the purple likely out towards 10 years. This is something that we say has to be monitored because it can change based on where infrastructure may be available and who owns the land and their desire to develop, and of course the economy. Another way of looking at this is we've provided a bar chart based on those developments. The taller the bar, the greater the number of units that could be built in that particular area. Again, we're not saying that everything, if I go back 1 slide, because this is a nicer visual, I'm not saying that we see building activity in all of those purple areas. We're saying at some point in our modeling, if we modeled years 6 through 10, we might see something starting to happen in one of those because of potentially who owns it or how it's close to infrastructure. All that's aggregated into the visual you see here to get a sense of the units that are available in each of those classifications. So when I look at that top left charts, we look at current total. In areas shaded in green on that map, there's 541 units that are existing, and there's still 1,200 more that could be built in those units. As you can see overall, we have about 4,000 units between the current 5-year and 10-year. Those that you would bank on more likely are the green and the yellow. And if we're averaging about 100 permits, we have 12 years if we go at that. Go back to what we were building back in 2014, 2015, and we have 3 years of current total available. So somewhere in between there we might fall. We've also looked at some of your economic development outlook, and so this is an excerpt out of the city's information, and we've provided some of those sources. You can link to that and look at some of these exciting projects or perspectives they're seeing as it relates to the property-based residential units and the commercial and industrial permit values. All that helps create the attractiveness moving into your community. So again, most of the things that we're seeing are growth. I do say I want to put a caution on the number of units that are being builds. If it continues on what is a slightward downward trend, that would not necessarily lead itself to being able to have the growth that we're forecasting. We don't think it's going to continue that way. Maybe for this year, but as we get past this year, it should be a reasonable number of units that are built. This gets me into the projections. All right, so the visual that you are used to seeing is displayed on the screen right now. So the red part of the bar represents elementary, the blue part of the bar represents middle school, and the green is the high school. The purple line at the top represents the aggregate of all three. So this gives you your K-12 enrollments. I've placed a black bar between the 23-24 school year and the board projections to the right, so you can differentiate between the current and past and the projected enrollments. The bullet points illustrate where we're seeing our growth. Remember, I think it was page 6 or 7, when you look at some of those number of students by grade as they move forward, we're having a lot more students move into the middle school and then on into the high school, validating building the high school. We'll show you that here in a moment. All this information on page 38, I'll talk about in greater detail here on this page. So what you're seeing on this visual is something that's a little bit new for you. And it's new in the sense that we've added this flex area. I want to talk a little bit about the flex area, because when you look at the flex area, you're going to notice there's no attend. There's reside, right? So we've geocoded all your students, so we know where the students are. We know how it relates to each of the attendance boundaries. So each of the buildings are listed on the left-hand side, and then we have a district capacity that's been provided by the district. Obviously, there's no building in the flex area, so there's no number there. They are going to be going to one of the other buildings. We'll go to a building, right? So we move to the right, we show the enrollment by building for the last 4 school years. The middle row green font is the reside, so do those students reside in that attendance boundary? The bottom row blue font is attend, and based on the student data, how many students are actually attending that building? The top row, purple font, is a subset of reside. It's the reside/attend, meaning do they reside and actually attend that building for the grades being served? There's also shading on this graphic. Green represents where it's under 70% of the capacity. Orange represents where it's exceeding 100% of the building capacity. What stands out in this visual is with Lakewood Elementary coming online in this school year, the previous year, look at the areas that have been shaded in orange. Fort Lincoln, Lewis and Clark, and Roosevelt. As we look at 23-24, no orange. As we move forward in time, we do have some underutilization that's at Mary Stark, and you can see 1 year up at Custer. But for the most part, what this means, we have plenty of space at the elementary level for some of the growth expectations over the next 5 years. When we go to the secondary, we have a different story. Remember, I talk about this wave of kids, and we look at Mandan Middle School, where we have a little under 1,100 capacity, and we get beyond that 1,075 number in 26-27, and through the projection period in 28-29, we're at about 1,150 students. That's why that's shaded in orange. So what do we do about that? That's probably a question that Dr. Bitts and Brian and team, they're trying to figure out what do we do, because it's just enough beyond what that capacity is that it does cause some concern. So again, some of the elements we have, elementary, we look like we're really good. The decision that you made with the elementary building sure is playing out nicely. Much like the decision for the high school, setting the stage that we should have adequate capacity even out beyond this 5-year projection period, probably through 10 years, maybe even beyond. So we get into some of our next steps. I want you to think about the bottom two orange boundaried areas. And some of it is with our observations of what it may mean for enrollments and capacity. And so when I look at Mandan Middle School, I've listed a couple of things there that we've seen as solutions until you know for sure, is it going to train up to 1,200 kids? What does that mean? Can you do an addition there? Do you have a new building? Is there a portable? Is there modular classrooms? Do you think about how you structure your classes? For instance, do teachers, do they stay in their classrooms? Do you allocate them a little bit differently? So there's some different things you can do without some brick and mortar. The other key consideration points I want you to understand that I've tried to touch on was live births, the size of the senior class that's exiting versus the incoming kindergarten, some of the migration trends, and then development trends. All of those things are items that we need to continue to monitor. They'll start to indicate, are we stabilizing? Are we going to continue to increase? Does it ramp up or whatnot? So those are elements that, again, we've applied to our model. There's a lot of things in the appendix that get into more of the storytelling. This is where I wanted to kind of leave it, and if there's questions, comments, and if I need to refer to some other things that are further down in the appendix to answer that, I'll do that. But I hope this is detailed enough that you feel comfortable about what direction and how you can address some of the challenges that are coming up. So let me stand for any questions or comments.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Schwartz. Anybody have any questions? A lot of information here. No questions? Got them all answered? Well, I think every questions were answered, Mr. Schwartz, so we thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure we'll look over it. If any of us got some questions, we'll probably fire them to Dr. Bitts, to you in relation to that. But thank you for putting all the time. And there's a lot of work that goes into this, and it really does help us lay out the next 5-year plan. So we appreciate it. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, just thank you for your time. And I saw you're going to get like 8 inches of snow this week, so yikes.
Didn't hear what he said.
That's going south of us. I hope.
All right. Thank you very much, and we
Thanks,
appreciate
Rob.
getting
Appreciate it.
on. Thanks, Rob. All right, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have review and consider approval of previous board minutes from March 4th, 2024. Review and consider approval of the February 2024 bills. Review and consider approval of the February 2024 revenue report. Review and consider approval of the February 2024 expenditure report. SEPTA to Heart River CTE minutes from March 12th, 2024. Review and consider approval of a second and final reading of the following policies: DCFA, Federal Fiscal Compliance; DJEE, Purchasing Procedures; DBCD, Records Retention; DBCD-E1, Records Retention Schedule; CE-E, Superintendent Evaluation Form; DA, Fiscal Management Goals and Objectives; DFA, Local Tax Revenue; DFD, Bond Sales; DFDA, Post-Issuance Compliant Procedures and Policies for Bond Issues; DFK, Gift and Bequest to School District. Review and consider a second and final reading to delete the following policies: DFC, Revenue Resources, or Revenue Sources. What are the wishes of the board?
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
All right, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Ms. Rebinich, please call roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. We have no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. First item under new business is review and consider approval for the following teaching contracts: Rob Graff, Science at Mandan High School; Chloe Markovic, Health at Mandan Middle School; Reese Hohertz, Science at Mandan Middle School; Tessa Johnner, Interventionist Credit Recovery Instructor at Mandan High School; Kelsey Kreit, Special Ed at Red Trail. Dr. Bitts.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to note on the middle school two hires. Those are two additional positions that we're adding. They're not replacements, and it's a reflection of what we just heard from RSP that we're getting more and more students there in an effort to try and keep our class sizes at a manageable number. We added two positions. There was some shuffling. We actually added two elective positions, and there was some movement. But I just wanted to make a note that that's one of the things we're doing right now to address some of that pinch that we're feeling at the middle school. And we would recommend the accepting of the teaching contracts and welcoming them to Mandan Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Ritterath. What's the wishes of the board?
I would like to approve those teaching contracts, and I'd like to say thank you for the Mandan Middle School, the extra hires for electives, because those middle school students need those electives. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Next item, review and consider approval of the following letters of resignation. Bonnie Riopel, 5th grade at Lewis and Clark. Kim Doctor, librarian at Lewis and Clark, and the three we added tonight, Eldon Crow, construction technology at Mandan High School, Ruth Sutherland, fax at Mandan High School, and Kayla Fisher, special ed at Red Trail. Dr. Bitts.
Yeah, all great employees. Hate to lose them. It's that time of year. Contracts were due on Friday. These people are choosing not to return. Some are retiring. Some are moving elsewhere, and some are moving on. And we wish them the best. I want to thank them for their service to Mandan Public Schools.
So all the other ones have signed their contract?
They have. I shared a sheet with you that showed people coming and going. Even though we've had people sign their contracts, I'm sure we'll have some other changes between now and next August. That always seems to happen, but
It does.
as of right now, everybody's signed.
All right. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll move to approve the letters of resignation and want to thank them all for their years of service to our district. We'll miss them.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second? And we have a second. Any discussion, comments, questions, anything? Hearing and seeing none, please call roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. And again, just want to reiterate, thank you for your years of service. We greatly appreciate all the work you do for our students. Moving on, future meeting dates, March 25th, Student Achievement, 5 o'clock at the Brave Center. April 1st, regular school board, 5:30 p.m. at City Hall. April 8th, Policy and Personnel, 5 o'clock at the Brave Center. April 15th, regular school board, 5:30 at City Hall. Any other meetings we need to be aware of? Mr. Legacy, we don't have one for the insurance one yet? Okay. All right, so that's what we have in relation to it. Anything else? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.